So sorry everybody for the delay. We're having tech difficulties, but good evening and welcome to How to Homeschool. So my name is Leanne. I'm the community events programmer for the Greater Sudbury Public Library. And tonight we have some special guests joining us to cover some of the questions you might have about homeschooling. So we have Stefan and Amanda Ostrander, who they're two teachers who homeschool their two daughters, and Stefan is a high school teacher in Sudbury, and Amanda now stays at home full time. Last year, they started a YouTube channel, Raising A to Z, to document their homeschooling journey and help other parents out. Our third panelist is Lisa Smilek, down there I see. And she's a mother of four kids.
Only four.
Only four. Yeah. So she's homeschooling a 9-year-old, 11, 13, and 15-year-old. And she has a bit of a background in teaching. She taught for 5 years before she decided to homeschool her own kids. So our session tonight is intended just to inform you and ask those questions. We have prepared some questions for our panel. So I guess we should get started since we're running so late. So Stefan and Amanda, so why did you choose to homeschool your children?
Hi, Liette. We chose to homeschool our children because we love the freedom. That's the biggest thing. Yeah. The freedom to learn whenever we want and wherever we want. The freedom to be able to explore different things. Our kids' interests and follow their interests. Sometimes, you know, if your daughter or son is interested in space, for example, but in Ontario, that's grade 6 curriculum. So if you have a kid who's 6 years old or 5 years old and loves space, you can follow that. You can do that.
We also love that we have the freedom to do what works for our family and not just being kind of pushed around by what the government parties do and when they change power, when they put in their own ideas of what was happening, that we could find what worked for our family and just continue on. And that was basically the freedom was really the reason why we started homeschooling.
Cool. Lisa, would you like to share why you started your homeschooling journey?
Yeah, so I had two main reasons. One was that I have a belief that parents are primarily responsible for educating their children, and I just felt that it was the best way to educate my children. I had a professor who homeschooled his children, and I was just really impressed with all the things they did. They, go to their house and they had their bodies traced with all the organs drawn inside their body and labeled, and they had so much opportunity to really learn, to really delve deep into various
and learn at their own pace as well, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, in their case it was accelerated for sure. And I guess a second reason is questioning the curriculum myself as a teacher. My first degree is in math, and I was mainly a math teacher, and so the way that math was being taught bothered me in quite a few ways. So I would get kids in high school and felt they were really underprepared for high school math, and so that was the one subject. And then also social studies, I always found it just felt so random. How you're in ancient Egypt, and then the next thing you know, you're in modern China, and I just felt the way our curriculum is designed, it doesn't really give the kids a good sense of the world around them, in a way they can absorb. So yeah, those are the two main reasons, I think. But we love the freedom too. And being able to make our own schedule and all those kinds of things is nice.
And learning doesn't have to be sitting at a table with a workbook, right?
It sure doesn't. No.
Yeah.
All right. So our second question that we had come up with as a panel was, what advice would you give to parents and families considering homeschooling for the first time? And especially those who are a little bit nervous about being able to teach their child because they don't have a teaching background or training.
So you'd like me to start, Leah?
Yes, please.
So it's hard to say where to start, I think, in a lot of ways, because it can vary from person to person. I think myself, I started by reading books about homeschooling. There was a couple books in particular that had a big influence on me. And podcasts are good. There's lots of websites you can go to kind of feel out what is going to work best for you. But I would encourage you not to be too nervous about it. You know how to learn, and from your own experience, and you know how to teach your kids. You've been teaching them since they were babies. There's no reason why you can't teach them, and there's no reason why you can't teach them what's important, right? Mainly if they're advancing in reading and math and, able to just continue growing in their understanding of various concepts, then you are preparing them. Like if you want to put them back in school, they will be well prepared. I don't think there's a specific process. Like it really varies from family to family what approach you're going to take. And as far as Ontario goes, there's no legislation as for what you have to do as a homeschooler. So you're free to do what's best for your children. And I think parents know what's best for their children most of the time. So it's not something to be that nervous about, I don't think.
We always say that like Teachers College never prepared us as to be homeschoolers, because really most of what we did in Teachers College was how to manage 30 people in a room.
People think you go to Teachers College to learn how to be a teacher, and that's not necessarily the case. So you go to Teachers College with knowledge in the subject, but then Teachers College is teaching you how to manage 25 to 30 people and how to teach that many people, how to make sure that you're hitting all those kids and all those different learning styles. But like Lisa said, you know your kids, you know how they learn, you know if they're tired one day and because they're up late the night before or whatever, that you understand what they're going through and all that sort of stuff. So.
And I also say, I think people have this weird idea that teachers automatically know everything about the subject they're teaching. And that's so not true. Like there's this wonderful thing called the teaching manual, the teacher's manual. Like it's a thing that teachers read before they teach the class that they're teaching.
And are so cramming at the last minute.
So like, I think once you take that idea away, you realize like I can learn these things too. I know most of these things. I just need a refresher. I can read the manuals that come with my curriculum books or watch the YouTube video, and then I can teach my kids that way, because that's what teachers are doing 10 minutes before they're teaching their class. So
I think another thing that's helpful is having the mindset that learning is for everybody. Even the teacher doesn't mean that you need to be up at the front teaching your kids. And same thing with teachers in school, like myself. Like it's okay to learn with your students. If there's new things that you don't know, own it and learn together. It's fun. It's a lifestyle.
Yeah.
Cool. That's very, yes, definitely motivating. Like I learn things every day, right? So learning with your kids is pretty special. So our third question was, what steps did you take when you made the decision to homeschool? And was there like a process to follow?
For us, it was pretty easy because our kids have never been in school, so we didn't have to write a letter of intent or tell the school board or anything like that. We decided actually before we had kids that we were going to homeschool, and did a lot of reading and learning about different things we could do and different approaches and all that sort of thing. And
I think too, if you're starting homeschooling, I think the three big things that we've been telling people who have been asking us is take some time to de-school, take a break from this, like your mindset of what school can look like. Read some books about homeschooling, and then start with like one or two subjects and focus on those, because you can always add things in. You don't need to do 8 subjects every day. Like, I think people are, again, like, they have this idea that their kids are doing science every single day, when really most kids are getting about 1 hour of science class a week. So you don't need to do everything every day. I think that's the big thing that we have been telling people recently.
And then once you get to high school and kids are doing, science every day, well, they're not doing all the subjects every day. They really only have 4 subjects in a day. And so, and you still don't need to follow that. You can.
Yeah. Lots of freedom.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm not sure I have anything to add to that, actually. It's
So were your kids in school and then out of school?
No, I never schooled I never put my kids in school either.
Okay.
No. And we basically decided before they were born, or when they were born, when my first was born.
But I understand that there is a process, right? That
there is a letter of intent. It's just one letter that you have to fill out
and send it to the school board.
You send it to your school board, and you have to do it every year, unless if your kids have ever been in school, you have to do it every year. But if they haven't been in school, you don't have to do it at all.
Yeah.
Okay. Cool. That's good to know.
Yeah, it's just a simple letter stating their name, their age, and what school they're attending, and saying that you're keeping them home. You don't have to answer any questions from the board or from the principal saying what curriculum you're teaching or any questions like that. You don't have to answer anything. Once you sent your letter, you've done your job, and that's it.
Yeah, and it's important to know that legally you don't have to answer any questions, because I do know people that have had boards contact them and ask them what they were doing. And I had one friend who was very open and just told them everything she was doing, which is fine. But if you don't want to tell them, or you don't feel comfortable telling them, you're legally not obligated to tell them anything. So.
Cool.
And you don't need the school's permission either. I have seen that recently going around, that the principal needs to sign off if you're homeschooling. That's not true either. You are legally entitled to keep your kids home, and all you need to do is send in a letter of intent to your school board.
It's just you being nice and courteous and letting them know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it was mentioned as well that homeschooling parents do not need to follow the curriculum, right?
No. Yeah.
Okay. Sorry, I'm like checking in with my counterpart on the other end to see how things are going. Yeah. So our fourth question is, do you work full-time or part-time in addition to homeschooling your family? And what can you say about the experience of like balancing work and homeschooling?
Yeah, so I do work part-time. I work as a vocational rehabilitation consultant, which is mainly from home work. So I've been doing that for 5 years now, but up until that time, like my first was born so for 10 years, I stayed home with my kids and we lived on one income, and I just started picking up part-time work 5 years ago. And so I do balance that out, like with our schedule. I kind of go back and forth from work to schooling throughout my day, and it does work for us, but yeah, it works well for us actually. So my kids are older, so that helps a lot because they can be independent in a lot of the work that they're doing, and I can check in on what they're doing throughout the day as well. And yeah, so it is possible for sure. It's definitely possible.
I'm a full-time high school teacher, and I've been going to my 13th year of teaching, but I still participate in the homeschooling, in the evening and on weekends and when I'm off and that sort of thing. So it's fun to be able to do that with my kids at any point, that we don't homeschool necessarily from 9 to 5. So that gives me an opportunity to be a part of that.
And then I run a lot of the blog and YouTube side of our business, where we kind of do all of that, talking about homeschooling. And I do that kind of in the margins of their day, during like a quiet time in the afternoon, or once they go to bed at night. And sometimes it gets to be a little tricky, but you kind of just make it work. Yeah. And homeschooling takes significantly less time than traditional schooling. So like, I can, sit down and do a couple of emails while they're, playing Lego or whatever, because they don't need that much time.
So on average, how long does it take you to plan? Do you plan by the week? Do you plan by the month? Do you plan as you go along? Or like, do you have like a master plan?
So I'm a bit of a planner addict, so I do have like a plan.
Monthly plan.
I have a monthly plan, a weekly plan, but it's not extensive. So like usually we do like a unit study or a theme for the month for our kids. Like our kids are quite young, so that kind of helps us. And then we kind of just work through, like I have a routine of they work through their math book, their language arts book, we do some journaling, and we read a story. And that's kind of our workbook time during the morning. And then for us, because my kids are younger, that's about an hour a day. And then the rest of the time we're doing other things, whether it's baking or reading other books, Lego. We'll do a couple of different, plan a couple of different activities. We go to the park or play group and meet up with friends. So we have a plan, it's kind of an overall plan, but it's also a very flexible plan that we can adjust it as we need to.
Yeah, my plan is flexible too. It's varied over the years what type of planning I do, I guess, but I have goals in mind for my kids for sure. And our routine is to start in the morning with at least an hour together where we do subjects together. So we do history together, we do geography together, and just sort of adjust it at their different levels, but they're all still capable of learning it all together, right? It's just a story, it's just the map of the world and so on, right? So so we do some group work, and then they have their own math, their own writing, their own grammar, spelling, science. I don't know if I'm forgetting anything, but they have their own independent work that they're responsible for. They have a checklist that I check every day to make sure that they're doing what I've asked them to do.
And they do it at their leisure, like, or do they?
Yeah,
specified times.
Last year they've been doing it at their leisure, but I think this year I might have to schedule it a little bit more because my boys are being a little too leisurely, I think. Yeah, I think COVID had a bad effect on.
It's had a bad effect on everybody, I think.
Yeah, because they're used to, like, even though you think, oh, well, it's the same because you're at home all the time, it's still not, because they miss their friends and they really lose motivation, I think, when they don't have that thing that they can look forward to when they're done. So.
Yes, for sure. Sorry for throwing that question, that sneak question at you guys right now, but good answers. So question number 5 we came up with was, where should parents and families be looking for resources related to homeschooling?
So when you're talking resources, I think you're talking like workbooks or stuff like that, right?
Yeah, I'm not sure. It wasn't in detail, but I'm assuming yes, or maybe some websites that you guys actively like use.
So I know you're talking that we just put up a list of the document that we did this morning. That will be on the page that we put up some
resources for parents.
Resources for parents. Kind of the Ontario curriculum, we put in the Canadian checklist of what is in the curriculum. I've also put in some like lists of workbooks and programs, like extensive.
And where to find them?
But for the most part, I think if you're looking for those kinds of things, some people like this. Everyone's different, and it's hard to suggest what to do because everyone is different. Some people love the $20 all-in-one workbook from Costco. Some people want to use something totally different. But I think if you kind of look around and do some reading and check out some of those lists and see what you're interested in. Sometimes chapters carry stuff, and a lot of stuff is ordered directly from the publisher because they make their own stuff. So
you can find things on budget, right?
Yeah, you can find anything from free all the way up to $1,000 a kid if you want for homeschooling. But there's definitely, you can teach your kids at pretty much any budget.
Okay.
True. I have lists of resources as well that I could post. I just didn't have time to create a document today, so
Okay, so I'm looking forward to that. So we are posting that resource list as a post on our Greater Sudbury Public Library Facebook page. So there's links and, like Amanda said, places where you can find some of the workbooks. There's also a list of support groups that support homeschooling families and parents, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And Lisa will supply, and I will post as soon as I get that. Yeah. Next question. Should parents and families be concerned about or considering how their children will be credited when they return to school or they enter high school or post-secondary schooling? If they are homeschooled, I mean.
Yeah, so did you want me to start that one? Yeah. So, I mean, there can be concerns for sure. It really depends on your goals and your children's goals as they're getting to that age. It's something to think through, definitely. But like you can't guarantee that without a high school diploma they're going to be accepted into a program. But we see all the time that there's adult students that, like mature students, that get into programs as adults. So, like in general, I think most colleges and universities are eager to get those tuition fees and add more students to their institutions. But at the same time, a lot of programs have hoops to jump through, and they're not necessarily going to be excited that you homeschooled. So it's something to think through. I do know people that have had some issues with their homeschooled students, but not major ones. Nothing they couldn't go around. One example was there was an apprenticeship program that the student had completed the whole program, but then the apprenticeship portion, they said, oh, you can't do the apprenticeship portion because you don't have a high school diploma. So things like that can happen, and it's something to consider, definitely. If you're worried about it, then you can do online high school and get your credits that way. There's ways to get credits, but it's just a decision you have to make on your own, what's best for your family.
So. If your kids are in high school and if you're concerned about it, one thing you can do is just make sure that you're kind of building portfolios for your kids too. True. So if you're not necessarily working towards a credit, but you want to try to get into a post-secondary school without the credits, you can show them their work through portfolio. And more and more universities and colleges are looking at portfolios.
And when it comes to like elementary school kids and secondary school kids, a lot of people have asked us, like, what happens when COVID's over and we want to send them back to school? I think it's important to tell you that it's very easy. You just have to take your kids to your local public school and register them, and they will be placed according to their age in elementary school. So they don't really skip grades or anything like that, which is something to consider if your kids are kind of like, because they're at home bouncing up or down different subjects, they will be placed according to their age, which is something to consider. And then high school, sometimes they do like a placement test or something like that to determine where they fit into the school system in that sense. But generally speaking, putting your kids back into public school is actually quite an easy and painless process.
Yeah.
Okay. So we are getting questions. Are you guys ready for? Might as well move on to the Q&A, and we'll finish off with our last question of that we had come up with. But I'd like to move on to the questions that we did receive. So it says, how do you address the social development that goes on in school? So how do you socialize your children, basically?
When you're at home, when you're homeschooling, it's kind of a misnomer because, the word is homeschool and you think, okay, well, normally kids are at home or they're at school. So if they're doing school at home, then they must be home all the time. But that's not necessarily the case. I know during COVID it's a bit different because some things are closed or there's restrictions and all that sort of thing. But generally, when you're homeschooling, your kids can still be very socialized because, you're meeting with family and you are bringing your kids, grocery shopping with you or out in the community, meeting different people. And socializing doesn't necessarily mean just being with a group of kids all the same age. When your kids go and talk to your neighbors and that sort of thing, that's socializing.
Yeah, I think especially in the public school system, they've kind of taken the word socialize to mean sitting around with people your own age in a classroom and that you're automatically learning things how to be. But really, when you're talking about socialization, socialization is about learning how to exist in your society. It's how to stand in line in a grocery store. It's how to order from a menu. It's how to talk to people when you're having disagreements. It's how to, like, those are all things that don't necessarily have to happen within a classroom. And so, we have a few very close family and friends who are homeschooling this year. We will spend some time with them, and that will be kind of our kids' socialization time. Spending time with family and grandparents and running errands. Like, those are all things that add up to socialization.
And plus sports, if they do sports and all the
sports, clubs,
added extracurricular activities, right?
Well, and we do, like, outside of COVID, we've had all kinds of organized homeschool events as well that, had art classes, there's Science North, I can't think on the top of my head what they all are, but we've done all kinds of things, hiking groups, and there's lots of ways to get together. And like they said, I think one of the biggest benefits is that they're not so peer oriented, like they can socialize with a large range of age ranges. And yeah, I get complimented on
as well as their peers, right? But
well, of course, yeah. And I know my daughter, she always says, like, she's able to build really strong friendships in homeschooling and more of a deeper friendship in a way, because like, when you think of at school, yes, you're interacting with people all day, but it's like, okay, you have a 20-minute recess, now go play, right? And there's all these kids pulling, like, it's not, you don't get that one-on-one sort of deep conversations. And we'll have a homeschool beach day and they're all just hanging out for 4 or 5 hours, and they just really get to know each other and have what I think are probably deeper conversations than most high school kids are having together. So.
Well, and how many kids end up with, like, being told, no more talking, don't talk. Yeah. It's quiet time at school. And when you start thinking like when homeschool kids get together, they spend a lot more time interacting with each other than even some of their peers in the school, because they're actually interacting. They're not just sitting there trying to do their work or being quiet or that kind of stuff as well.
And no one's mocking them if there's something they're really interested in either. Like, they don't have that sort of, well, I guess it can happen in homeschool groups too. It's not like they're all perfect children or anything, but they can often have interests that they really delve into together. So,
are your kids really into Pokemon? Maybe not.
Yeah.
All right. Great answers. So my second question was very similar. I think you've addressed it, so I'll bypass that one. The next one is, our kids are in French school. Do you have any French resources to share?
I don't really. Besides Duolingo, that's all we use at our house. So
French is hard. French is hard for resources because Quebec is very, they have very, very strict laws on homeschooling. And so you have to use their curriculum and that kind of stuff. So we're not getting a ton of French curriculum coming out of where we should be. Like, we should be getting curriculum coming out of Quebec, and we don't have a lot. It's a tricky one. There are French programs out there. I'll see if I can scrounge some up and add them to the list, but French is a hard one to find resources in. I know Jump Math does their math. You can get their math program in French. But yeah, other than Duolingo, which I know a lot of people use, I think they have a kids version too of Duolingo. that some people do for like younger kids. But yeah, French is a tricky one.
The real way to learn French is if you're I guess if you can't teach it, if you can't speak it yourself, it's very hard to teach. But if you're speaking with them and reading to them in French and teaching them that way, then they'll learn a lot that way too.
Yeah, our kids like to watch. Sometimes we try to put on like Netflix and stuff. You can put on. They can have like the French version of a show that they've seen and stuff like that. French songs, French.
We do a lot of singing.
Yeah.
Playing different word games and things like that in French. Even when we're going bike riding, we'll play I Spy in French.
So, but it is easier because we are French speakers. So there's that.
I know. Even for library materials, we are very limited by Quebec as well. Like for the Quebec authors, like it's kind of ridiculous when you think about it, because like we don't have anybody else giving us resources, as well as like for programming purposes as well, right? Like we have no resources, so we do the best we can. We use Educatu, which is I use it, and it's a pretty good site. It's by theme. There's sciences, there's math, there's arts, all sorts of like different kind of activities to do with the kids. So I really like that one. I can add it to the post as well. Mm-hmm. I agree that, but I wonder, do you have a lot of French or Francophone homeschooling parents in your homeschooling group on Facebook?
There's a few, for sure. Yeah. There are people who post every once in a while saying that they educate their kids completely in French. And are like, sometimes there'll be a post where they're looking for other French-speaking families.
Yeah.
So I think a lot of like I said, I think there's a lot of they're building their own. They're doing their own unit for their own history or their own stuff based on what they are finding, whether it's books or documentaries or whatever, because like actual workbooks are really tricky to find. But yeah, people do it. They make it work. But I think it's a lot more piecing together different resources than if you were just straight to go through English. You can find way more.
So our next question is, how do you meet other homeschoolers?
Well, the Facebook group is a good way to start. If you are on Facebook, that's a really good way to start connecting with people. When I first moved to Sudbury, there was a Yahoo group, and that's how I started making connections. If you make a post and just give a brief introduction to yourself, there will be people that have similar situations to you, that have kids your age and similar interests almost all the time. So if there's something you want to do, that's a good place to go to organize events or try to find somebody to connect with, for sure.
Well, I think right now the ironic thing is there's going to be a lot of people. Because I know for us, when we were starting, that it kind of seemed like you had to kind of work for finding people because there were so many kids who were in school, right? Like everyone was, in school basically once you were 4. And so now we have this opportunity where there are so many people in our community who are their kids are staying home from school, that people who never would have homeschooled, that we are actually going to spend more time with outdoors and hanging out and stuff like that. So in terms of finding homeschoolers, it might actually be easier right now than
probably.
Yeah.
All right, so I'm going to read exactly what's written. So, to properly understand, there is no homeschooling curriculum that officially get them high school credits. Only being in an actual school board is where they are granted credits for post-education.
For secondary education?
Mm-hmm. I know VLC and ILC. There's a couple online that are accredited. They are run through their government, basically online high schools that you can go to and get credits from. That some people do, especially if their kids are interested in something. I want to say more advanced, but that's not the right word. If they were like interested in like a medical profession or something like that, where it's a little more competitive, you can use those kinds of sites to get credits that will go towards a diploma.
Okay. So it says here, as a homeschooling community, will you be organizing get-togethers this year during COVID?
Well, there's definitely a lot less. I think it's going to be tricky. Maybe outdoor gatherings are safer, but there was a few groups that last year were organizing a fair number of activities, but I don't think there was one church that was meeting in a church, or group that was meeting in a church, and they won't be meeting indoors right now. It's not allowed really. So
it's not doable right now.
Yeah, so it's tricky. I mean, people have friends and will be making little gatherings with their friends, I'm sure. And it's hard to know until things loosen up exactly what people are going to be comfortable with doing. So.
Well, and I think if you're interested in meeting with people, I think your first thing would be to go to your own friends and family on Facebook and see who's keeping their kids home this year. And from there, maybe build a small pod. Like we have my sister-in-law who's homeschooling her kids this year, and I have another close friend who's homeschooling. And so when we want to get together, it'll kind of be the three families, and that's about it. So if you're looking, that might be the easiest option of, building a kind of a homeschool community for this year, of actually getting together with people.
Yeah. It's too bad, because if it wasn't COVID, because of COVID, people are homeschooling, but then because of COVID, it's harder to have the interaction that we normally have. So,
yeah.
From my, I'm part of your homeschooling Facebook page, and I often see the posts on there, and you guys are very supportive. Like every member is always trying to help somebody out with a question, or if they don't know the answer, they try to find it for them or guide them. So I really feel the sense of community on your Facebook group page, which is nice to see. So I don't think there's any other questions coming. Let me take a quick look. Oh, yes. There's one more. So what would you say are the more challenging aspects of homeschooling, and how have you risen to the challenges? Any tips for middle school? So three-part question, really.
I know last summer, I was the challenge for homeschooling because, I was home for 2 months and just kind of wanted to do my own thing and, hey, what are we doing today? Let's do this. And the girls, would have an interest or say, hey, can we go and do this? And I'd say, yeah, let's go. And kind of threw the wrench in the gears of it. But we tended to do kind of more unschooling during the summer anyway. But this summer's been a lot better, and we found a good groove and
that was a communication that we definitely talked that one out. I think for me, one of the biggest challenges is I tend to be a little bit more on the introverted side, in the sense that having the kid with me all the time can be a little bit overwhelming, and that especially now that we can't go anywhere, we have that restriction. There are days where it's a little bit harder, and I think one of the things that we find helpful, and it does take a little bit of training to teach the kids how to do it, but we have a quiet time every day. And so it's like an hour to 2 hours where our kids they go to a room that is safe, they have all access to their stuff, their toys or whatever, and they can do something quietly. and they can, you know, play with Play-Doh or read a book or color a picture. But in that time, they're pretty much to stay in that room unless they have to go to the bathroom, and that's a chance for me to go and sit and, you know, take a breath, have a cup of tea, and that's been super helpful for me, is kind of making sure that that is definitely a part of our routine. And the days when we don't have it are definitely the days when we feel the stress. I feel the stress a lot more. So even older kids, I think, really benefit from having kind of a quiet, independent time in the afternoon after lunch. So try that.
Okay. It's hard to speak to the challenges. It's harder when they're little, for sure, because they're always meeting you. But I guess, well, one thing I always kind of joke to myself that is a challenge is you're missing that cycle of the parents get to blame the teacher and the teacher gets to blame the parents, but you're responsible. So it's, you only have yourself to blame when there's problems with your kids. And yeah, like kids are challenging. They're challenging whether they're at home or at school, and they will challenge you. I'm not sure how to speak to how I've risen to those challenges, but you just keep keeping on. You just keep making goals and making plans and.
Tomorrow's always a new day.
What's that?
Tomorrow's always a new day. Like
exactly. Tomorrow's always a new day. There's always, and you make your expectations. You try to hold your kids to them and teach them to be responsible, and over time it pays off when there are things that they can do capably. So
it's like adults. Everybody has a good day or a bad day, right? Kids are the same.
Yeah, and I guess actually another big challenge is that you're always at home. So there's no time when, the kids are gone, you can clean, right? Or, unless you might have grandparents or you have, but it is harder to keep your home when you're homeschooling. I think that's fair to say. You can, as they get older, like we definitely have chores that they have to do and to keep things going, but it's always harder when you, like, all your meals are at home, all your garbage is at home, like there's nowhere that they just go and
somebody always making messes.
Yeah, there's so.
Well, like I said, your kids are a little older now, but ours are in the thick of mess making of kindergarten and
like pick something up. Oh, I don't know that. There it goes.
And so we constantly are like, okay, one day they will understand how to pick something up. One day, but that's another process. Real challenge.
It takes longer than you think.
Your house is always empty.
But it's also a good opportunity at home to teach them to be responsible and to have, they can develop cooking skills. Like my kids, they make lunch. I don't make lunch anymore, right? They're able to develop a lot of those kind of skills on a regular basis, which we all have to do, right?
So, the life skills part of homeschooling, right? We didn't talk about that today, but that's a big part of it.
Definitely.
Learning the life skills to go out on their own eventually, right?
We don't really do that in school, right? So there's a big opportunity there for a lot of people this year.
Yeah, and a lot of kids who are just so, like, they spend all their time at school and then after school they have programming, like they're in hockey every day, or they're, like, a lot of those kids, they will grow up and, I've known people that they have no idea how to do laundry or no idea how to prepare a meal. Just buy new underwear instead of wash it because they don't know what to do. So, we need to prepare our kids for those things as well.
All right. So it's about 8:11. I know we started late. This will shut down at 8:30 though. So we have maybe time for 2 more questions. So one that filtered through, and our last question that I wanted to ask you as the library. So do you suggest using a curriculum specifically to keep track of the lessons that are being taught as the months and potentially years go by? How would you keep track?
So I like to use curriculum. Oh, sorry, you can go ahead.
You go first. Go ahead.
I like curriculum, but like if you don't use curriculum, then it's a good idea to track what they're learning somehow, right? There are lots of good math curriculums out there and writing curriculums, and then like you can choose your curriculum based on the goals that you want your kids to meet, right? So, a lot of it is, I mean, I get excited about it. I find them beautiful, and like I like learning how they've come to their philosophy and how they've developed that curriculum. But like the different publishers, how they've come up with it. I would mostly recommend that using a curriculum is a good idea, especially if you're concerned about certain skills you want them to develop. But there's tons of ways to learn without curriculum as well, right? The library is a fantastic resource. We use it extensively. For me to have 100 books signed out at once.
And, yes, you do. Are you missing our interlibrary loan service?
I am. Yeah. We've been pretty slow in the summer, but and that's a free resource that you can learn tons from. There's lots of instructive videos on YouTube. There's so many ways to learn. You can, just get a book and work through it together. There's
so by trying out that you figure out what is good for your child, right?
That's right. Like it depends on the subject area, right? Like to me, the biggest things are, can they read, can they write, can they do math? Those are important things for my kids to be able to do. Then after that, everything is, history can be learned in 100 different ways or a million different ways, right? Or science. There's just so many approaches you can take where they'll, like you can do it in a more engaging way. You can do it in a book. There's lots of approaches you can take where they're still going to get that knowledge and grow as people. So
you might not be using a curriculum in the traditional sense of the word, or having books and things like that, but to keep track of it, you can write it down in the planner or that sort of thing, and keep track of what your kids are learning. But there's lots of other things too that they might be interested in learning. If they're building amazing stuff with Lego and doing some engineering and things like that, you won't necessarily have a book on hand that they wrote in to keep track and say, oh yeah, they did this. That's pictures, video, portfolio, and writing down in a planner or something.
And I think like you, Lisa, I love curriculum, and we kind of tend to pick like curriculum for math and for kind of like a language component, even though we're younger, and then we build a unit study that kind of is something our kids are interested in. And I think that's interesting that you don't need a curriculum for every subject. I think I've seen a lot of people who are saying like, well, I don't have the money to buy a curriculum for every subject. You really don't need one for every subject, especially if it's nice, especially like a math curriculum kind of walks you through how to step by step, how to teach them how to do things. It takes the brain work for you out of it, and it means you're not missing things that you wouldn't think of because you haven't done first grade math since you were in first grade. But it's nice in that sense that you don't need like a very expensive workbook.
You're going to pick and choose different things.
Pick and choose, and sometimes you can find some really cool random things. Like this year, we found a really fun language curriculum book at Chapters that was only $15, and our daughter's going to love it. And sometimes you find some really cool stuff at the dollar store, or like you can find different pieces of things kind of everywhere and at any price point. So, but yeah, having some curriculum is nice because it takes some of the brain work for you as a parent out of the equation.
Yeah, decision fatigue is real, right? So it's nice to have somebody having decided a lot of that stuff for you. And there's a lot of curriculums too that basically recommend books as well. So it's sort of like, the curriculum itself is quite cheap, but it has tons of book recommendations, and a lot of those you can get at the library or you can purchase, and a lot of times you can resell them because other homeschoolers are looking for them too, right? So you might pay $20 for it, but get 15 back. So if you're on the swap sites and all that kind of stuff, those are
for sure
options for sure.
All right, so our last question to wrap up the night, and then I will do a little thank you, and that'll be it for us this time. So do you have any words of encouragement for parents and families looking at homeschool as an option during these uncertain times?
You can go first.
All right. I think one of the things I really love the most about homeschooling is just the time with the kids and enjoying learning together. There's often so many kids in school that develop kind of a distrust of the learning process, or kind of not wanting to learn. They're kind of growing out of it, I guess. I'm not sure exactly what it is, but if you're working with your kids and you're, loving learning and loving the learning process together and kind of raising in that way, it's really special.
Something we talked about yesterday was how when all this started, when all COVID started, and they just extended March break for 2 extra weeks. So kind of 3 weeks of, it's just 3 weeks of March break. We saw a lot of people saying how much they were loving this time with their kids, and they were loving the baking lessons and the art projects and all these things that they were doing. And then online school, but then online schooling kicked in, and they're like, oh, we hate it. It's like, this is so nice that this can be an opportunity to go back to those 3 weeks when you guys can do those things as a family, and you can, enjoy that time and, doing things that your kids love, doing things that you love, showing them things that you love that you have never had the time to show them.
Yeah.
And so it's kind of, in a sense, like if you enjoy those 3 weeks in March, like maybe homeschooling is really for you. Like maybe it's not as scary as you think, and maybe it's going to really be this amazing thing for your family. So you might as well try it. It's really not that scary once you get into it.
There were families who were like, each picking something to bring to the table kind of thing, and everybody else would learn about it. So even the kids were the teachers, they were showing the parents what Minecraft is and how Minecraft works and that sort of thing. It's fun. It's an amazing thing.
It's fun.
Yeah, it's all learning. And you develop that love of learning. It's just, it'll never stop.
That's for sure. Yeah. I guess I would just encourage you not to be afraid of it. I mean, everybody has to decide what's best for their own families, and you shouldn't be afraid to make that decision and do what you think is best for your kids and your situation. There is tons of support out there, so don't be afraid that way. And very few posts on our Facebook group will go unanswered. Someone will always answer, helping you with your questions. And there's a million resources out there. There's tons of things you can use. And like they said, there's teachers don't necessarily know everything, and actually learning together is really what brings joy to learning for your kids as well. And I know that's what we do. There's all kinds of stuff that I learn with them, and it's more exciting that way. It's fun to go into a book or delve into a part of history that you never learned previously, and sort of, oh wow, I never knew, or science concepts or nature studies can be really exciting as well. Your kids just getting outside, and these days getting outside is just so therapeutic when we're trapped in our houses all the time. Going for a hike, and that's a real benefit we have in Sudbury. There's so many beautiful places to go visit and so much to learn. There's 1,000 rocks you can you can learn.
Plenty of leaves and trees.
All the leaves, all the trees, there's just, yeah, all kinds of things to learn and enjoy with your kids if you have that possibility right now.
Well, and it's exciting for them when you don't know, right? When they ask you a question, you're like, I don't know, let's go figure it out. Like, it just blows their little minds. Like, our kids are little, so they can't imagine us not knowing the answer. But
I think also if you do it enough, that I think it becomes normal. Like, oh yeah, not everybody knows everything.
Yeah. Well, now it's common for my kids to be like, yeah, we know you don't know that, Mom.
My grandson is like that with me too. He's like, I know you don't know that, Granny.
My boys get into the mechanical stuff, and I don't have the brain for it. So that's a conversation for Dad. Yeah.
All right. So I think I'll wrap this up. So for those people who are watching, I'd like to thank you guys for tuning in and watching us, even though we've had technical difficulties. So my coworker has told me that it will be posted on Facebook as a video after our session is done. And plus keep track of our postings, because we will have those resources for all of you posted in 7 minutes at 8:30, at least part of it anyway. And then once Lisa sends us some more, then we'll add it to our GSPL page. I'd like to say a big thank you to Amanda and Stefan, and to Lisa, and for sharing your insight and like shedding a bit of light on what homeschooling really is, because it can be scary for a lot of parents who really don't know. I've learned a lot from you guys just in the short meetings and this session tonight. So I'm hoping that everybody else in our community who is watching this also finds answers to some of the questions that they are debating with for September. Any last little parting words? And then we'll call it a end of session.
I know you put our information, it'll be in the post there, but we're happy to answer questions if anyone has something else that comes up. All of our Raising A to Z details are there at the bottom, so you guys can message us and we'll happily answer whatever we can, or point you in the direction of whatever we can.
Cool.
Yeah. I personally can't commit to answering a lot of questions right now. So, and
that's fine. That's fair.
Do some camping in the next couple of weeks. So,
that's fair.
Probably posting on the Facebook page is the best way. And if somebody wants to send me a PM through Facebook, I would get back to them when I can. But
they can also join
any false impressions that I'm going to be answering right away. They
can also join the homeschooling page, right? And like put a post out there, like if they're like
absolutely. Yeah, there's tons of people, and there's lots of people that were shy to come on this, to come on a live event like this. Yes. But they're excellent homeschoolers. There are people who are curriculum nerds in our group that have a million ideas, way more than we do, and there's a lot of support out there. So,
all right. So I think this wraps up our session. Thanks again, and stay safe, everyone, and have a great evening.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.